Chapter 15. Leopard Fur paused outside the medicine den. She didn't want to hear more bad news. Cold weather was biting harder into the camp. In the moon since White Claw had died, the fresh kill pile had dwindled as Leaf Bear tightened its grip. The clan had gone to their nests hungry more than once as land prey grew scarce, and heavy rain, then ice, made the river almost impossible to fish. And now there was sickness. Sedge Creek, Shadepelt, and Mallowtail were already in the medicine den, and now Mudfur asked to see her. Was he going to report that another clanmate had been stricken with the illness that seemed to be spreading like fleas through the camp? Her father ducked out into the camp, his eyes dark. Had she guessed right? Was another clanmate sick? Who is it? Tangle Whisker. Mudfur's tail twitched uneasily. I've moved him to the medicine den, but Birdsong might have already caught it. I'm keeping an eye on her. Do you know yet if it's White Cough? Leopard Fur hoped it wasn't more serious. An outbreak of green cough could devastate the clan. I'm still not sure, Mudfur confessed. I only know that none of my herbs can cure it. Will they die? I don't know, he mewed. Sedge Creek has stopped taking even water. Shadepelt's fever is getting worse. Nothing I give them seems to help. Leopard Fur felt a fresh wave of anxiety. Mudfur spent every moment with his patients. What if you catch it? We'd better pray to StarClan that I don't, he mewed. There's no other medicine cat to look after the clan. She met his gaze. She wasn't worried about looking after the clan. She'd find a way to do that if she had to. What scared her most was that Mudfur might die. He seemed to read her thoughts. I'm a survivor. Don't forget, he mewed. Would it help if there were more food to eat? Had she let her clan down by allowing the fresh kill pile to shrink? Guilt tugged at her belly. Could she have sent out more patrols? Inside the medicine den, Sedge Creek started coughing. Mudfur turned to head back inside. Do you need more herbs? Leopard Fur suddenly felt scared of letting him out of her sight. Not yet, he answered grimly and disappeared inside. Leopard Fur! Black Claw's mew made her turn. The smoky warrior was heading across the frosty clearing, Heavy Step at his heels. The fur along his spine was rippling anxiously. What now? Leopard Fur hurried to meet him. Has something happened? We've found ThunderClan scent on our territory, Black Claw told her. Near Sunning Rocks, Heavy Step added urgently. They must want even more of our hunting grounds. They must be planning an attack, Black Claw mewed. Leopard Fur's tail twitched. Could there be another ambush, like the one that killed White Claw? A moon ago, she'd have been bristling with rage, but now only fear pulsed beneath her pelt. Go back and find evidence, she told Black Claw. A twig or some grass with ThunderClan scent on it. Black Claw's eyes widened. Don't you believe us? We'll need proof to take to the gathering, she told him. We can't wait for the gathering, Black Claw argued. We have to deal with this now. ThunderClan cats have been snooping around on our land. Her ears twitched irritably. And what would you have me do? She asked. Launch an attack on their camp? Ambush one of their patrols? We need to let them know that if they cross our border, they'll face a fight, Black Claw growled. Heavy Step's tail was lashing. We should send a patrol to confront them. There's sickness in the clan, Leopard Fur reminded him. It's nearly Leaf Bear, and we're hungry. We're in no shape to confront ThunderClan. The last thing Mudfur needs is more cats to care for. Black Claw flexed his claws. I thought you'd want to stand up to them. He'd watched her chase WindClan warriors from their territory not long ago. She'd been so sure of herself then. How long ago that seemed. Before White Claw died on her watch, before Leaf Bear, and before the sickness. The last time we confronted ThunderClan, White Claw died. This time, I want proof before we act, she told him. Go back and look for it, but keep your heads down. Act like you're looking for prey. Don't make it obvious. Black Claw scowled. Do you want us to act like trespassers on our own land? Of course not, she snapped. But I don't want you to provoke ThunderClan. If they are planning an attack, I'm not giving them an excuse. Blackclaw swished his tail angrily. I never imagined you'd be intimidated by ThunderClan. I just want RiverClan to be safe. Frustration jabbed Leopardfur's belly. Surely Blackclaw understood. He turned away, growling to himself. Heavystep glanced back at her, then followed his former mentor out of camp. She watched them leave, pressing back the feeling that she'd let them down. It's for the best, she told herself, hoping it was true. Bright moonlight bathed 4 trees. Frost sparkled on the grass, and the earth was frozen beneath Leopardfur's paws as she followed Crookedstar across the clearing. Their clanmates headed away to share tongues with the other clans, and Mudfur joined Yellowfang and Running Nose beneath the trees. She'd had to persuade Mudfur to join the gathering patrol, and he'd only agreed after Shimmerpelt and Beetlenose had promised not to leave his patients and to send for him immediately if they got worse. Leopardfur kept close to Crookedstar as he wove between the warriors crowding in the clearing. The scent of Wind Clan made her hackles itch. It was their first gathering since ThunderClan had brought them home, and the prey-rich moor was beyond RiverClan's reach now. Her clan was hungry, and the border was freshly marked every morning, as though Wind Clan was making sure every RiverClan cat knew they would never again be allowed to cross it. Crookedstar glanced at her as they reached the great rock. Remember, let me do the talking. This is a delicate matter. She'd told him about the ThunderClan scent found near Sunning Rocks, although Blackclaw's second patrol hadn't produced any more evidence than the first, and Crookedstar had agreed with her that there was already enough tension between the clans now that Wind Clan was back, and he didn't want to risk a war. But he'd taken Blackclaw and Heavystep's report seriously, and wouldn't let the gathering pass without saying something about ThunderClan's trespassing. He blinked at her. Okay? Okay. She had no intention of speaking up. There'd been a time when his caution would have insulted her, but now she understood it. She wanted Crookedstar to see that she was the best deputy she could be, and a good deputy knew it was better to keep quiet than risk starting a war they couldn't win. As he leaped onto the great rock, something moved in the shadows beside her. She stiffened as she smelled Tigerclaw's scent. The ThunderClan deputy stalked into the moonlight and sat beside her. You'll let Crookedstar do the talking? He glanced at her. What happened to the fierce young deputy who was willing to say what she thought at gatherings? She bristled, remembering their strange conversation after the gathering where she'd spoken out of turn. At the time, she'd found him convincing. Now she was still angry that he'd attacked her at the gorge. She wasn't sure whether he sincerely wanted her to speak her mind, but she did know that this was a warrior that would say one thing and do another. And still she couldn't help admiring how sure he seemed of himself. She wished she were so confident. Right now, she seemed only able to react to events, while he seemed to anticipate them. Remembering how he'd encouraged her to confide in him before, she wondered whether Tigerclaw had actually had a paw in making those events happen. Perhaps he was playing with every cat, like they were mice in his thrall. He blinked at her coolly. What delicate matter was Crookedstar talking about? You'll find out at the same time as every other cat, she snapped. Do you agree with him this time? Of course I agree with him. He's my leader. She fluffed out her fur self-consciously. Did he think she'd become a pushover? I can't disagree with him all the time. His whiskers twitched. I suppose it's a tricky balance. I'll do whatever I think is best for my clan. I'm sure you will. He tucked his tail over his paws. I should warn you, I'm going to say some things tonight that might ruffle a few pelts. But if I mention RiverClan, don't take it personally. He gazed across the crowd. I just want to shake things up a little. Shake things up? She tensed. What did he mean? Blue Star's angry yowl sounded above. The ThunderClan leader was glaring at Crookedstar, while Tall Star and Night Star watched uneasily. RiverClan has been hunting at Sunning Rocks, Blue Star snarled. Leopardfur's eyes widened. That wasn't true. Was the ThunderClan leader trying to cover her clan's tracks by making the first accusation? Crookedstar returned her gaze. Have you forgotten how recently one of our warriors was killed defending our territory from ThunderClan? One of our warriors? Leopardfur's heart lurched. Whiteclaw. Would ThunderClan apologize? But Bluestar seemed determined to argue. There was no need to defend your territory, she snapped. Our warriors weren't hunting there. Tigerclaw hadn't moved. His gaze betrayed nothing as the clan leaders accused each other of trespassing, until Leopardfur wondered if RiverClan was the only clan that hadn't crossed a border in the past moon. She scanned the crowd. If the other clans had been trespassing, would they give themselves away? Her gaze settled on Greystripe and Fireheart. They were sitting close together, like always, resembling a pair of smug owls. As Crooked Star accused a ThunderClan cat of crossing the RiverClan border, Fireheart seemed to stiffen. He glanced at Greystripe, and Leopardfur narrowed her eyes. Why did he look so alarmed? Were they the trespassers? Suddenly, Tigerclaw growled beside her. We have scented ShadowClan in our territory as well as RiverClan this past moon, and not just one cat, but a whole patrol, always the same cats. She stared at him. What in StarClan was he talking about? A RiverClan patrol on ThunderClan territory? She hadn't ordered it. Neither had Crooked Star. Her tail quivered. Was this what Tigerclaw had meant by shaking things up? Nightstar glared indignantly at Tigerclaw. ShadowClan has not been on your territory. When Tigerclaw snorted in disbelief, the ShadowClan leader glared down even more angrily. Do you doubt the word of ShadowClan, Tigerclaw? The crowd murmured uncomfortably as Tigerclaw stared back at Nightstar with unconcealed distrust, and for the first time Tallstar spoke. My warriors have also found strange scents in WindClan territory. They seem to be ShadowClan. Tigerclaw's eyes lit up, as though this was the reaction he'd been looking for. I knew it, he snarled. RiverClan and ShadowClan have united against us. As Crooked Star spat with indignation and Tallstar bristled, Leopardfur blinked at Tigerclaw. Is this what you wanted? She demanded. He blinked back at her without answering, his gaze betraying nothing. Suddenly the 4 trees clearing seemed to be swallowed by shadow. Leopardfur looked up. Clouds had covered the moon. A ThunderClan elder yowled in alarm. StarClan has sent the darkness! Running Nose yowled from beside Mudfur. StarClan is angry. These meetings are meant to be held in peace. Within moments, the leaders had leaped down from the great rock, and the clans began to break apart, heading for the slopes. Leopardfur felt suddenly cold. Have we really offended StarClan? Tigerclaw got to his paws and headed away without speaking. Leopardfur watched him go, unease spreading beneath her pelt. He'd looked so pleased. This must be what he'd intended by shaking things up. But what exactly was the ThunderClan deputy playing at? He must be lying. As far as she knew, no RiverClan cat had been near ThunderClan territory. Was Tigerclaw trying to cause a war between the clans? Wake up! Leopardfur jerked up her muzzle as paws poked her shoulder. What is it? She struggled from sleep, blinking open her eyes. Dawn light was filtering through the den roof, and Skyheart was staring into her nest. Nightstar is here, the pale brown tabby mewed. He's talking to Crooked Star. Leopardfur scrambled from her nest. She'd slept in late after last night's gathering, but the ShadowClan leader clearly had not. When did he arrive? She asked Skyheart. Just now, Skyheart told her. He just appeared at the entrance. He crossed our territory without an escort? Leopardfur's pelt pricked nervously. It must be important to risk giving such an insult, unless Nightstar was becoming as arrogant as Broken Star. He apologized, Skyheart mewed. But he said it couldn't wait. He had to speak with Crooked Star. Leopardfur picked her way between her clanmates' nests. They were beginning to stir, stretching and yawning, though not quite awake. She ducked out of the den and hurried across the icy clearing, following Nightstar's scent to Crooked Star's den. Crooked Star? She paused outside. Is Nightstar with you? Come in. Crooked Star blinked a welcome as she slid through the trailing moss. He was sitting beside Nightstar in the gloomy half-light, his tail tucked over his paws. She dipped her head to the ShadowClan leader. What brings you here so soon after the gathering?" Couldn't he have said what he wanted to say to Crookedstar last night? "I want to make sure our alliance still stands," Nightstar told her. "Why?" Leopardfur stared at him. "WindClan is back. There's no way we can share their land now." "This isn't about their land," Nightstar mewed. "It's about survival." Crookedstar's expression was grave. "I'm beginning to believe that ThunderClan brought WindClan back to start a war," he mewed. "They've been planning to move against us all along," Nightstar chimed. "They just needed WindClan's support." Crookedstar nodded. "You heard them last night," he mewed to Leopardfur. "All those accusations. They're just trying to find an excuse to attack us." "Wait." Leopardfur took a breath, trying to resist the urgency and fear in the two leaders' eyes. If Tigerclaw had intended to shake things up last night, he had certainly succeeded, but he'd lied to do it. RiverClan hadn't been on ThunderClan land. Should she share her suspicions about the ThunderClan deputy? She hesitated. It might make Crookedstar and Nightstar more determined to form an alliance. They'd assumed Tigerclaw and Bluestar spoke with the same voice and that his lies were part of ThunderClan's plot. Besides, part of her was still curious about Tigerclaw's motivations. If he had come up with a scheme, she could learn something by watching it play out. "Won't declaring an alliance provoke ThunderClan more?" she mewed. "It might just prove their suspicions about us are right." Crookedstar narrowed his eyes. "It's not like you to hold back in the face of aggression." "They haven't attacked us yet," she told him. "I think we should wait." He frowned. "I should be pleased you've learned to manage your temper, but I wish you hadn't decided to do it now." Nightstar was staring earnestly at the RiverClan leader. "We need to declare our alliance sooner rather than later," he urged. "Running Nose had a dream a few days ago that darkness was coming. He thinks war is coming to the clans. If it is, I want a strong clan to fight beside, a clan like RiverClan." Crookedstar fluffed out his fur proudly, but Leopardfur cut in before he could speak. "Won't war come sooner if we declare an alliance against ThunderClan and WindClan?" she argued. "We don't have to declare it," Crookedstar told her. "It'll simply ensure our mutual safety." Leopardfur shifted her paws. He might be right. Blackclaw had found ThunderClan scent on RiverClan land. Bluestar could be scouting in preparation for an attack. Leafbear hunger and the sickness spreading through RiverClan had made them weak. An alliance could be the best way to protect the clan. Crookedstar was looking at her expectantly. She dipped her head. "RiverClan needs an ally," she conceded, "and ShadowClan has proved trustworthy in the past." "Good." Crookedstar pulled his tail tighter over his forepaws. "Then the alliance stands." He blinked at Nightstar. "But it shouldn't simply be a defensive treaty. I'm certain that ThunderClan and WindClan are looking for an excuse to attack us, and I think we should make the first move." Chapter 16. Dawn light glittered on the snow capping the thick heather wall of the WindClan camp. Leopardfur shifted her paws as she sat between her clanmates. The battle had gone well. Blackclaw, Skyheart, Stonefur, and Heavystep looked pleased. Their pelts hardly showed a scratch. Crookedstar and Nightstar had made the right decision when they'd decided to target WindClan first and take the fight right into their camp. Most of WindClan's warriors were still scrawny from their exile, and though they'd fought bravely, the patrol of RiverClan and ShadowClan warriors had easily overwhelmed them. Now WindClan was pinned down between the gorse dens of their own camp. RiverClan and ShadowClan warriors ringed them, while Crookedstar and Nightstar addressed Tallstar. "You should never have returned home," Crookedstar growled. "ThunderClan is using you!" Nightstar's tail swished ominously. "Once they've used your warriors to take our land, they'll turn on you too." Tallstar glared at them, rage glittering in his eyes. "Don't judge ThunderClan by ShadowClan standards." His warriors crouched behind him, their tails lashing, their eyes slitted. Queens and elders huddled among them, along with Barkface, their medicine cat. Every WindClan cat had fought to defend their camp, and Leopardfur had been impressed how well the skinny warriors worked together. but it hadn't been enough to chase the River Clan and Shadow Clan patrol away. "Just leave," Crookedstar glared at Tallstar, "before either we or ThunderClan drive you out again." Tallstar turned away and began talking to his warriors in low whispers. Blackclaw shifted beside Leopardfur. "They have no choice but to leave," he muttered.
ThunderClan will think twice about sending spies onto our land once their allies are gone,
Skyheart growled. Heavystep curled his claws into the earth. "We might even be able to take Sunning Rocks back." "Especially if ShadowClan helps." Stonefur pressed his belly lower against the earth. Leopardfur's pelt tingled nervously. For once, she wasn't sure that RiverClan should press their advantage. It would be enough to drive WindClan away. ThunderClan would have to back off, and until Leaf Bear was over and the sickness gone from the camp, that was all she wanted. RiverClan wouldn't even need Sunning Rocks. With WindClan gone, there'd be more land to hunt. Ending the war here with a single battle would be the safest choice. She stiffened as an unexpected scent touched her nose. It was fresh, drifting through the camp wall. One Whisker? Why had the WindClan Tom returned? He'd fled the battle. She'd watched him pelt out of camp, his tail bushed with terror, just as they'd forced WindClan to concede defeat. Had he crept back to see what was left of his clan? Pelt prickling along her spine, Leopardfur crept toward the entrance. Her whiskers twitched uneasily. There were other scents, faintly discernible through the freezing air. Something was wrong. As she peered warily through the gorse tunnel, a yowl from the clearing made her jerk around. She bristled. Tallstar had leaped on top of Crookedstar. The WindClan leader was spitting, tumbling Crookedstar across the grass, clawing at him viciously. His warriors streaked from behind him and, despite their wounds, flung themselves at the ring of ShadowClan and RiverClan warriors. Shock pulsed through her. Was WindClan really willing to fight to the death? Even the queens threw themselves into battle once more. Morningflower leaped at Little Cloud, raking claws across his muzzle and screeching as he dragged her down and began to tear at her ragged pelt. Leopardfur hesitated. WindClan was hopelessly outnumbered. Her clanmates were already clawing and slashing at them so fiercely that the battle would be over in moments. A shriek sounded beyond the heather camp wall. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes widening as one whisker streaked through. Did the WindClan warrior think he could save his clan single-pawed? She stiffened as another warrior raced after him, then another, and she recognized the strong stench of ThunderClan. One Whisker had fetched help. Alarm shrilled through her fur as a ThunderClan patrol surged into the WindClan camp and spread out. She recognized Fireheart's flaming pelt as he streaked across the clearing and ripped Little Cloud away from Morningflower. The WindClan queen staggered, bleeding and exhausted, toward the edge of the camp as Fireheart pinned Little Cloud to the ground. Pain made Leopardfur spin around. Claws sliced her ear. Slitting her eyes and dropping into a battle crouch, she saw Stagleap rear in front of her. The WindClan straggler had rejoined his clan. He brought his forepaws down on her shoulders with such force it knocked the wind from her, but she rolled, grabbed his pelt with her claws, and dragged him down, churning her hind paws against his belly. "This time leave with your clan!" she hissed as she flung him away. As he landed, his paws splaying beneath him, a ThunderClan Tom lunged at Leopardfur. She struggled to find her paws, and he knocked her easily to the ground and held her there, raking her ears with his claws. She struggled free, ignoring the sting of her wounds, but Stagleap had found her again and snarled at her, aiming a blow at her muzzle. She ducked just in time and shot beneath him, heaving him up and twisting on her back paws to swipe at the ThunderClan Tom, who was coming at her from the other direction. She backed away, the two Toms glaring at her. The clearing was a mass of writhing pelts. Yowls and hisses filled the air. Her breath nearly stopped as she saw Greystripe lead a second ThunderClan patrol, howling into the camp. WindClan seemed to have revived. Two WindClan Toms rose together on their back paws and began to swat Skyheart toward the camp wall. Leopardfur dodged as Stagleap tried to claw her muzzle, but the ThunderClan Tom hooked her scruff from behind and hauled her backward. She smelled his meaty breath and braced herself for his bite, but he staggered suddenly and let her go. Stonefur had slammed into his side and knocked him off balance. The RiverClan Tom aimed blow after blow at his muzzle as the ThunderClan warrior tried to recover his balance. Leopardfur turned to deal with Stagleap, but Heavy Step had already leaped on top of him and was rolling him away, his pelt spiked with rage. "Fireheart!" Leopardfur pricked her ears as she heard Tigerclaw's cry. The ThunderClan deputy was hardly visible behind a wall of ShadowClan warriors. He sounded as though he was fighting for his life. She saw Fireheart charge toward him. Anger flared through her pelt. Tigerclaw would have to fight alone. Leopardfur had unfinished business with the flame-colored Tom. As he streaked past, she lunged for him and grabbed his hind legs between her paws. "You!" she hissed as he thumped to the ground. He was going to pay for being part of the patrol that killed White Claw. He kicked out at her. Surprise sparked in her belly as she tumbled away. He was strong, but stupid. As she jumped up, she saw he'd flipped onto his back, exposing his soft belly. Seeing her chance, Leopardfur reared and came down on top of him with all her might. She heard him grunt as she knocked the wind from him and dug her claws into his belly. He screeched in pain, his gaze rolling toward the end of the clearing where Tigerclaw had been battling. The ThunderClan deputy had ripped free of his attackers and was standing in an empty space in the battlefield. "Tigerclaw!" he yelled. "Help me!" Leopardfur hesitated, but didn't loosen her grip on Fireheart as he writhed desperately between her paws. Tigerclaw was watching them, his eyes cold with hatred. He didn't move a paw to help. "What is he doing?" Leopardfur's thoughts whirled. "Doesn't he realize his clanmate is in trouble?" She clawed at Fireheart's belly again and again. This Tom was going to pay for what his friend had done to White Claw. The smell of his blood filled her nose, and she aimed another blow, rage pounding in her ears. Suddenly, Fireheart kicked out. The speed and fierceness of the blow took her by surprise. It lifted her high and flung her across the clearing. She landed with a thump, disbelief sparking through her fur, and scrambled quickly to her paws, hoping no cat had noticed. "He won't get rid of me that easily." Hissing, she shouldered her way through the crowd. She was going to finish this. But Fireheart was gone, swallowed by the battle. Lakeshine screeched with pain a tail-length away. A WindClan Tom had clamped his jaws around her tail, while a ThunderClan she-cat slashed at her muzzle. Leopardfur dived toward them, throwing a hefty blow that sent the ThunderClan she-cat reeling away. She clawed the WindClan Tom's ears until he let go. And as Lakeshine reared beside her, she lashed out at his nose. Together they batted him backward through the melee. Whitestorm pushed in front of her and knocked her down with a fierce swipe. The White Warrior leaped at her, but she rolled clear just in time and leaped up, digging her claws into his flank. With a snarl, she pulled him close and pummeled him with her hind paws. Then she heard Nightstar screech. The ShadowClan leader was being driven backward by Fireheart. The ThunderClan Tom dived forward and sank his teeth deep into Nightstar's shoulder. Leopardfur knocked Whitestorm away. Panic was welling in her chest. The ShadowClan leader looked like he was fighting for his life. With a yowl, he struggled free of Fireheart's grip and fled for the camp entrance. Eyes flashed toward him, and his warriors broke away from the battle and chased after him, racing like rats from the camp. "Mousehearts!" Dread gripped Leopardfur as she realized that RiverClan was suddenly alone and heavily outnumbered. Mousefur charged at her in a blaze of brown fur. The ThunderClan she-cat grabbed her pelt and dragged her down. Whitestorm was pushing his way back toward her. Leopardfur ripped free of Mousefur's claws and reared as Whitestorm and Mousefur came at her side by side. Leopardfur backed away, flailing with her forepaws as she tried desperately to fight them off. Where was Crookedstar? She glanced around the clearing. Her heart dropped as she saw the RiverClan leader face to face with Tigerclaw. The two warriors crouched low against the grass, their tails lashing menacingly. Crookedstar leaped first, but Tigerclaw was quicker. He jumped out of the way and, as the RiverClan leader hit bare grass, turned and lunged at Crookedstar's back. The ThunderClan deputy grasped the RiverClan leader with his long claws, and Leopardfur froze as Crookedstar went limp beneath him. As Tiger Claw bared his teeth and lunged for Crooked Star's neck, a hefty blow from White Storm sent Leopard Fur staggering backward. "Retreat!" Crooked Star's desperate cry rang over the camp. The River Clan leader had escaped Tiger Claw's grip and was pelting for the entrance. Around her, River Clan warriors were ripping free of the fight and racing after him. Leopard Fur glanced at White Storm and Mouse Fur. They'd dropped down onto all fours and were glaring at her, clearly waiting for her to run. She snarled at them, humiliation searing her fur, then raced after Crooked Star. She glanced over her shoulder. Tiger Claw still stood where he'd defeated the River Clan leader, watching her with amusement glittering in his eyes. Every hair on her pelt sparked with rage as she raced through the gorse tunnel and out onto the moor. The days following the battle were cold and the snow thick, but Leopard Fur still sent out patrol after patrol to check for ThunderClan's scent inside their borders. Her clanmates were recovering from their wounds, and the sickness had stopped spreading, but the river had frozen, and prey was so scarce that she'd sent patrols to wait at the Wind Clan border for any land prey that crossed the scent line. She'd also taken the time to praise her clanmates for their courage in battle. Stonefur in particular had shown a skill she hadn't noticed before, and she looked at the young warrior with new respect. There was fierceness and solemnity in him that she admired. She even wondered if he would make a good mate for Silverstream. The silver and black she-cat seemed lonely. She had been keeping herself apart from her clanmates. Was it possible she was still mourning White Claw? Leopard Fur kept an eye on her, watching her day after day until at last she decided she should speak. 4 days after the battle, the snow at last began to melt, and Leopard Fur carried a water vole to where Silverstream was sitting alone beneath the sedge. The sun was just beginning to set behind the trees. She dropped it at Silverstream's paws. "You must be hungry." The young she-cat had been hunting all day, though she'd brought back little prey. Silverstream dipped her head. "Thanks," she mewed, "but give it to some other cat." Leopard Fur heard Silverstream's belly growl, but she didn't argue. Mosspelt had kidded, and nursing 3 healthy kits was sapping the queen's strength. She'd welcomed the extra prey. Leopard Fur blinked at her and decided to come straight to the point. "You seem lonely." "Do I?" Silverstream looked surprised. "You keep to yourself too much," Leopard Fur mewed. "Then I can't be feeling lonely, or I'd look for company," Silverstream mewed. Leopard Fur's pelt twitched. Silverstream didn't seem to appreciate her concern. "Are you missing White Claw?" "White Claw?" Silverstream looked puzzled for a moment, then dipped her head. "Yes," she mewed, as though remembering. "Of course." "You've been patrolling with Stonefur a lot lately." Leopard Fur had made sure they'd shared the same patrols, hoping that they might make a connection. "He's a good warrior." "I guess." Silverstream eyed her as though wondering what Leopard Fur was getting at. Leopard Fur pressed on. "He'd make a good mate, don't you think?" Silverstream blinked at her. "Are you thinking of taking him as a mate?" "Me?" Surprise sparked through Leopard Fur's pelt. That was not what she'd imagined at all. "No. I thought he'd make a good mate for you." Silverstream looked away quickly. "I don't want a mate." Perhaps White Claw had meant more to her than Leopard Fur had imagined. "You can't mourn forever." "I don't want a mate." Silverstream sounded irritated this time. "Why?" Leopard Fur knew she was annoying the she-cat, but she couldn't help but ask. Silverstream flicked her ear, annoyed. "I don't need a reason, do I?" she asked. "You don't have a mate. Do you have a reason?" Leopard Fur felt a tiny pang in the tender part of her that still questioned what life might have been like as Frogleap's mate. She didn't have a reason that she wanted to share. Perhaps Silverstream felt the same, and Leopard Fur would respect that. But she still wondered why. The sliver of curiosity nagged her through the night, and in the morning, as the sun reached high into a blue sky, it grew as Leopard Fur noticed Silverstream heading out of camp. She hadn't assigned the young she-cat to any patrol. She'd wanted to see who Silverstream did choose to be with, even if only as friends. But Silverstream hadn't chosen any of the patrols. Instead, she was slipping away without saying goodbye to anyone. Leopard Fur waited for a few moments and followed her out of camp. Hanging well back, she trailed Silverstream along the shore, across the newly thawed river, and into the line of trees that grew in the direction of the ThunderClan border. She kept downwind and stayed out of sight as Silverstream finally came to a halt a few tail lengths away from the scent line. Leopard Fur's hackles lifted as she saw a gray pelt on the other side of the border. Gray stripe! Her paws seemed to freeze to the earth as the ThunderClan Tom crossed into RiverClan territory and touched noses with Silverstream. The young tabby she-cat's eyes shimmered with pleasure and affection, and Leopard Fur fought the urge to rush forward and swipe her claws across Graystripe's muzzle. How could Silverstream do this? She was Crooked Star's kit. How could she betray her clan? And with the warrior who'd killed Whiteclaw. Leopard Fur's claws itched with rage, but she kept them sheathed. This was not a problem that could be solved with a single confrontation. If Silverstream was as fond of Graystripe as she appeared, this was something that needed to be dealt with carefully and quietly. Leopard Fur was not going to sacrifice the harmony of RiverClan by making a scene. Before she could decide what RiverClan should do about Silverstream's betrayal, she had to decide how she felt about it herself. Chapter 17. Leopard Fur had sent out the patrols for the morning, but kept Silverstream back in camp. For 2 days, she'd fretted about what to say, or whether to say anything at all. Perhaps the meetings with Graystripe would come to a natural end. But Leopard Fur knew she was grasping at thistledown. Silverstream was young and in love. Leaving her alone to sort out the problem was too risky. And Leopard Fur wanted to protect her from making a mistake she and RiverClan might live to regret. She'd have to talk to her. She beckoned Silverstream with her tail, trying to sound casual. "Come hunt with me." "Me?" Silverstream blinked at her in surprise. Leopard Fur glanced around the clearing. Who else would she mean? Sedge Creek, Shadepelt, and Mallowtail were resting outside the medicine den. They were still weak from the sickness that had taken Tanglewhisker, but were clearly willing to endure the drizzle for a little fresh air. Mudfur sorted through herbs beside them, while Reedtail cleared Tanglewhisker's nest from the Elder's den. Birdsong was helping Graypool gather reeds. The old gray she-cat had finally decided to make a nest in the Elder's den. Leopard Fur was pleased. Graypool had seemed confused on her last few patrols. She needed rest, and Birdsong would be glad of the company. As Leopard Fur headed for the entrance, Silverstream seemed to drag her paws. Had she guessed that Leopard Fur planned to use the patrol as a chance to talk? "Where do you want to hunt?" Silverstream asked as they reached the stepping stones. "In the water meadow." Leopard Fur bounded across and waited on the far side. She hadn't worked out what to say to Silverstream yet. "Let's catch a frog for Birdsong," she mewed. Silverstream followed. "She must miss Tanglewhisker. The camp doesn't seem the same without him." "I'll never get used to losing clanmates." Leopard Fur thought of Whiteclaw with a pang. Had he been watching Silverstream's secret meetings with Graystripe from StarClan? She stopped at the edge of the water meadow. The pools shimmering in dips among the long grass reflected the overcast sky. Water rippled on one. Something was moving there. She headed toward it, opening her mouth to taste for frog scent, and stopped a few tail lengths from the edge. The frog was scrabbling clumsily over the mud. She dropped, ready to pounce, but it dived into the water and disappeared. Shaking out her pelt, Leopard Fur crouched in a patch of marsh grass. Silverstream nosed her way in and settled beside her. "I taught Whiteclaw to hunt here." Leopard Fur felt a twinge of sadness. "Frogleap helped me. This is probably where I fell in love with him." "You loved Frogleap?" Silverstream jerked her muzzle around. "Is that so strange? Did she think Frogleap had only ever been interested in Mosspelt?" "I guess not." Silverstream turned back to the pool. "I just can't imagine you being in love with any cat." Leopard Fur hesitated.
Really? You're kind of old. I'm not that old. You're older than me.
Silverstream was watching the pool. I was probably your age when I fell in love. Leopard Fur shifted her paws. This was as good a way as any to start the conversation. I thought I'd love him forever, and he'd love me forever. But life isn't like that. We have other responsibilities.
I guess you did,
Silverstream mewed.
You wanted to focus on being deputy.
That doesn't mean I don't regret giving up Frog Leap, Leopard Fur mewed. But I knew I had to do what was best for my clan.
Maybe it was the best thing for you, too.
Silverstream didn't look at her. What do you mean?
I guess you wanted to be deputy more than you wanted to be with Frog Leap.
Leopard Fur was surprised by a jab of irritation. Was Silverstream judging her?
The clan needed me more than Frog Leap did.
Silverstream tucked her tail along her side.
It must be nice to be so sure of yourself.
Leopard Fur sat up. She didn't like Silverstream's tone.
I'm sure of River Clan, she mewed sharply. That's what I care about, and I'll do anything to protect them.
Silverstream looked at her.
Is that why you dragged me out here?
She sat up too.
Are you scared I'm a danger to my clan?
Leopard Fur blinked. Silverstream had clearly guessed why she'd brought her here.
Am I that transparent?
She tried to read Silverstream's gaze.
Aren't you scared you might be a danger to them? Why would I be?
Silverstream tipped her head to one side.
You know why,
she snapped. After such perceptiveness, Silverstream's obtuseness was irritating.
Graystripe's a Thunder Clan, Tom.
Graystripe? Her eyes rounded. Was she really going to pretend to be innocent?
Don't be cute. How did you know I was meeting him?
I've seen you together.
You spied on me?
I watched you. Leopard Fur wasn't going to apologize for keeping an eye on her clanmates. Silverstream looked away.
I love him.
He's our enemy.
He's not my enemy.
Leopard Fur's breath caught in her throat. She suddenly realized why Silverstream had come to the medicine den after White Claw had died. I heard that Graystripe tried to save White Claw. Silverstream hadn't wanted to find out what had happened to her clanmate. She'd wanted to defend the cat she loved.
How long has this been going on? She demanded. That's my business.
Silverstream pushed her way from the grass. Ripples arced across the pools as a frog fled into the water. Leopard Fur didn't care. She could catch a frog for birdsong later. Right now, she had to try to reason with Silverstream.
It's the clan's business.
Leopard Fur followed her.
Don't you realize you're breaking the warrior code by seeing him? It's not harming anyone,
Silverstream snapped.
It will if it goes on. How?
Silverstream glowered at her.
How can loving a cat harm anyone?
Leopard Fur pressed on. What will Crooked Star say when he finds out? Silverstream glanced at her paws.
Who cares?
I care, Leopard Fur mewed. I don't want him or you to get hurt.
No cat's going to get hurt.
Do you really believe that? She snapped. Silverstream didn't answer.
Can't you just leave me alone? I'm not going to do anything to threaten your precious clanmates.
Leopard Fur couldn't believe what she was hearing.
They're your precious clanmates, too. Yes, they are. And unlike you, I trust them. I don't need to sneak around spying on them like a nosy old mother duck.
Rage burned beneath Leopard Fur's pelt, but she forced herself to take a breath. She let her fur smooth. Anger wasn't going to help. I'm the clan deputy. I need to be a nosy old mother duck. I need to know everything that's going on so that I can help my clanmates make the right choices and be the best warriors they can be. That's the only way River Clan can thrive. Do you think River Clan won't thrive because I love a cat from another clan? If every cat broke the warrior code, the clan wouldn't be a clan. Leopard Fur stared at her. This was basic warrior training. How could she not understand?
It would be a gang of rogues doing exactly what they pleased with no regard for anyone else. But I love him!
For the first time, Silverstream's eyes glittered with pain.
I can't stop loving him just because the warrior code tells me to. You said you loved Frog Leap. Did you stop when you decided your clan needed you more? Did you just decide not to love him one day?
The words were tumbling out now, as though she couldn't hold them in anymore. Pity welled in Leopardfur's chest as Silverstream went on.
I wish I could do that. I wish I could decide how to feel.
Leopardfur patted closer. I'll probably always love Frogleap, she mewed. Every time I see him with Mosspelt, I feel jealous, and I wish I didn't. It hurts. But I know I made the right choice. I know it could never have worked. Fresh anger flashed in Silverstream's eyes.
And you want me to do the same?
Don't you see? Leopardfur mewed desperately.
You have no choice. You can't take Greystripe as a mate. He's a ThunderClan cat.
And he killed Whiteclaw. She swallowed the words back. They wouldn't help.
The only way to be with him is to leave RiverClan.
Silverstream puffed out her chest.
I might do that.
Shock pulsed in Leopardfur's throat. And be a rogue?
I'd join ThunderClan.
You'd join an enemy clan? Leopardfur stared at her in disbelief. Think of what that would do to Crookedstar.
He'd get over it.
He's clan leader, Leopardfur snapped. How would he hold his head up after his own kit betrayed her clan?
It's not a betrayal,
Silverstream's fur ruffled.
It's a choice, like you wanting to be deputy.
Leopardfur snorted. It's nothing like me wanting to become deputy. I did that for the good of our clan. You're only thinking of yourself.
What's wrong with that?
You're a warrior! Leopardfur suddenly felt weary. Silverstream couldn't mean these things. She was a good cat. She was loyal and smart. If she weren't caught up in a storm of emotions, she'd never say this. They stood in silence for a moment, as though both of them realized that they'd gone as far as they could. Then Silverstream spoke.
Will you tell any cat?
Her mew was trembling now.
About me and Greystripe?
Leopardfur didn't move. Giving away Silverstream's secret would do nothing but cause upset in the clan. Cats would take sides. Some would turn on the young she-cat, which could drive her away from RiverClan for good. Wasn't that what Leopardfur was trying to avoid? And Crookedstar would be put in an impossible position. He couldn't defend her, and it would break his heart to confront her. What if he was forced to exile his own daughter? I won't tell, she mewed. Relief showed in Silverstream's wide blue eyes.
Thank you.
But you have to promise to stop seeing him. Silverstream stiffened.
I can't do that. I love him, and he loves me.
Though she knew this romance was wrong, Leopardfur's heart ached with sympathy for the young warrior. Whatever you choose will break your heart, she mewed softly. But you need to decide whether you want to break your father's heart as well. She felt bad using guilt to persuade Silverstream, but it was true. And how else could she convince her that if she continued her relationship with Greystripe, she would only damage herself and her clan?
Please don't tell him,
Silverstream mewed helplessly.
Not yet. Give me a chance to sort this out for myself.
Leopardfur shifted her paws uneasily. Dishonesty could harm the clan, but in this case honesty might do just as much damage. And Silverstream was young. Leopardfur didn't want her remembered as a traitor just because her feelings had gotten the better of her. Leopardfur's responsibility was to protect her. If that meant keeping her secret for a while longer, then she'd do it. But she would still try, in every other way, to stop Silverstream from making a terrible mistake. In the days that followed, Leopardfur tried not to notice when Silverstream disappeared from camp. With every day that passed, she hoped that the tabby she-cat was closer to ending her relationship with Greystripe, but she feared she was only a day closer to being found out. The rain battered the camp relentlessly. Crookedstar had been anxiously watching the river rise. Now, as Leopardfur settled into her nest, tired from a day's patrolling, she could hear it thundering past the camp. She was happy the patrols had brought back enough food to ensure no one went to their nest hungry, though fishing hadn't been easy. Most of the catch had been land prey, with only a few fish hooked from the shallows where a bend in the river slowed the current a little. Leopardfur still had tufts of feather between her teeth from the sparrow she'd eaten. She eased them out with her tongue, as she huddled deeper into her nest and closed her eyes. Silverstream still worried her, but she was tired and pushed her thoughts away. I can think about it tomorrow, she told herself, and let herself to drift into sleep. An agonized wail cut into her dreams, and she jerked up her head. The den was still dark, but some of the nests were empty. In others, her clanmates were sitting up, their pelts bristling as groans sounded from the clearing. She blinked at Reedtail, whose eyes were wide with alarm. What's happening? She mewed. I don't know. He scrambled from his nest and headed for the den entrance. She ducked out after him. Mallowtail was crouched beside the medicine den. Birdsong retched nearby. Mudfur was darting from one cat to another as they huddled in the clearing, their fur ruffled, clearly in pain. Leopardfur raced to Mudfur's side. What's wrong with them? As she spoke, Heavystep vomited violently beneath the sedge wall. Mudfur's eyes glittered with fear. It looks like they've been poisoned. Leopardfur glanced in panic toward the nursery. Mistyfoot had only recently kitted, and Mosspelt's kits were close to trying their first taste of prey. Are Mosspelt and Mistyfoot okay? There's no sickness in the nursery, he mewed. Leopardfur felt a rush of relief. He nodded to Sedge Creek, who had emerged, blinking from the warrior's den. Take any cat who's still well and collect mallow, he told her. I need as much as you can carry. Sedge Creek nodded. Be as quick as you can, Leopardfur added. Then she paused, a thought sparking in her mind, and added, What did you eat tonight? Sedge Creek glanced at her. A vole? Ottersplash, Cedarpelt, and Piketooth slid from the warrior's den and looked anxiously at their sick clanmates. What's happened? Ottersplash mewed. They've been poisoned. Leopardfur hurried toward her. What did you eat tonight? I shared a mouse with Greypool, she answered. And you? Leopardfur asked Cedarpelt. A starling. I had starling too, Piketooth volunteered. Leopardfur hurried to Heavystep's side as he huddled beneath the sedge, shivering. What did you eat tonight? She asked him gently. Trout, he grunted, his eyes bright with pain. She darted to Mallowtail's side. Did you eat fish? She asked. I shared a chub with Birdsong, Mallowtail told her, swallowing back sickness. They ate river food. Prey from the shore hadn't harmed anyone, but the cats who'd eaten fish were sick. Leopardfur felt suddenly cold. The river, on which they had always depended, had somehow poisoned her clanmates. Chapter 18. They buried Birdsong at dawn. Leopardfur was thankful that the elder was the only cat who'd died from the poisoned fish. Mallowtail, Heavystep, and the others had recovered, but they were weak from the sickness, and the whole clan was grief-stricken at the loss of their clanmate. Leopardfur had insisted on being part of the burial patrol, and there was still earth between her claws as she led the search party down to the water's edge and slid into the river. The tug of the current took her by surprise, and she had to fight to stop herself being swept downstream. Churning her paws to hold herself in place, she glanced back at the rest of the patrol. They were struggling too, but managed to keep close to her as she pushed further out into the stream and made for the far shore. Her heart was pounding by the time she felt stones beneath her paws and hauled herself out. The water was high even here, where the river was wide and reached as far as the trees. Leopardfur found herself in the middle of a thicket of brambles that used to be several tail lengths from the shore, but now trailed their branches in the water. Stonefur followed her out. Piketooth and Skyheart scrambled after them. They halted beside Leopardfur, breathless. Skyheart shook out her pelt. At least the rain's stopped for now. Leopardfur looked at the sky. The clouds were still thick. The rain might start again at any moment. They had to find whatever had poisoned the river and get back to camp before it did. If the river rose any higher, it wouldn't be safe to cross, and they might be stranded here until the water receded. Stonefur's whiskers were dripping. Do you really think it could be ThunderClan who planted the poison? He asked Leopardfur. Her pelt ruffled. Of course it was. WindClan would never have had the nerve after we defeated them in their own camp. Pike-Tooth's tail swished irritably. If One Whisker hadn't managed to get help, we'd have won the battle and WindClan would be gone by now. Leopard Fur remembered again how pleased Tiger Claw had looked as RiverClan had fled the WindClan camp. His look had stuck with her. It wasn't just a look of victory, but of satisfaction, as though a plan was coming together. But she also remembered how he'd let Fireheart fight for his life without lifting a paw. The ThunderClan deputy was even more ruthless than she'd thought. A cat like him was certainly capable of poisoning the river. And what about Graystripe? The more she thought about the ThunderClan Tom, the more she became convinced that he must have had something to do with the poisoning. Surely he was the warrior who'd been leaving ThunderClan scent on RiverClan land. Was he following Tiger Claw's orders? She wondered if seeing Silverstream was just a pretense. Perhaps he'd been using the RiverClan she-cat to get access to the river. Silverstream might even have inadvertently shown him the secret pools and streams where a piece of rotten prey could be hidden and allowed to fester and infect the whole river. "We should search the streams that feed the river on this side," she told the patrol. Stonefur glanced at the roaring water. It was breaking over the banks, washing the shore and lapping between the trees. "It won't be easy," he mewed. "A lot of them will have been swallowed by the flooding." Leopard Fur glared at him. "I don't care how hard it is. We have to find what's caused this. I'm not letting another clanmate die." "Okay." He dipped his head. "Do you think it's definitely rotten prey?" "I don't know. It might be a bundle of poisonous herbs or berries. Just look for anything unusual." Stonefur began to pick his way between the brambles, his nose close to the ground. Pike-Tooth headed between the trees. Skyheart blinked at Leopard Fur. "I'll search farther upstream," she mewed. "Okay." Leopard Fur scanned the forest. "Don't get too far away from the patrol. ThunderClan may have crossed the border again." She flexed her claws. She hated to feel her warriors weren't safe on their own territory. As Skyheart padded away, Leopard Fur walked over to where a ditch cut into the earth. Water flowed along it toward the river, and she sniffed it warily and began to follow it back, deeper into the woods. The water smelled fresh, tainted by nothing but earth. She hopped over it and began to look for another ditch. Frustration hardened into anger as she searched ditch after ditch and found no sign of anything that could have contaminated the river. If Graystripe had poisoned the river, he had timed it well. If he had planted the rotten prey or herbs before the waters rose, they would now be hidden beneath the surface. She hurried further along the shore. She had to find the evidence before he had a chance to retrieve it and hide ThunderClan's crime. She spotted Skyheart's pelt between the trees. "Have you found anything?" Skyheart looked at her apologetically. "No," she called. Pike-Tooth and Stonefur were padding toward her. She looked at them hopefully. "Any sign of poison?" "Nothing," Stonefur told her. "You?" "Nothing." Stonefur frowned. "I don't think we'll find anything while the river's running so high," he mewed. "I agree." Leopard Fur's pelt twitched with irritation. There was more at stake than finding proof of a ThunderClan plot. If they couldn't find the source of the poison, the river would remain unfishable. With prey already scarce, RiverClan would go hungry, and hunger meant weakness. Another thought was nagging her too. If she could prove that ThunderClan had caused this, Silverstream would see that Graystripe had just been using her. It would put an end to their relationship without Crookedstar and the rest of the clan finding out. But it looked like she wouldn't find the evidence today. Disappointed, she turned back toward the trees. "Let's head back to camp." "Are you sure it's ThunderClan?" Crookedstar blinked at her through the gloom of his den. "It has to be," Leopard Fur insisted. "First they made an alliance with WindClan. Then they made WindClan's battle their own. It's obvious. They want to drive us off our land." Crookedstar's tail was twitching angrily. "Isn't Sunning Rocks enough for them?" "They want our woods and the river too." "What good is the river to them?" "None." Her tail swished over the den floor. "That's why they're willing to poison it." A low growl rumbled in Crookedstar's throat. Leopard Fur was relieved to see he was angry. "There's no way to prove it while the river's so high," But we can't let this pass. We have to find the source of the poisoning before they get a chance to cover it up." Crookedstar nodded. "The other clans should know that ThunderClan is full of treacherous cats. No true warrior could poison another clan's prey." "WindClan wouldn't be able to support them," Leopardfur chimed. "We'd break up their alliance." Crookedstar flicked his tail. "When the river starts to recede," he told her, "take another patrol to look for the poison." "Okay." Satisfied, she headed for the entrance. Silverstream was waiting outside. She hurried to meet Leopardfur.
"Why didn't you take me on your patrol?"
Her pelt was rippling angrily along her spine. "I thought you preferred to go out alone," Leopardfur mewed pointedly. Silverstream followed her as she headed across the clearing.
"You think it was ThunderClan, don't you?"
she hissed. Leopardfur glanced around the clearing. Stonefur was watching with interest from the fresh-kill pile, and, outside the nursery, Mosspelt looked up from her kits as they splashed in a puddle. Leopardfur steered Silverstream to the shelter of the sedge wall.
"Every cat thinks it's ThunderClan," she hissed back, "including Crookedstar." "Only because you've convinced them it was," Silverstream glared at her. "Why do you have to blame everything on ThunderClan?"
"You were at the battle, weren't you?" Leopardfur wondered how Silverstream could defend the clan that had attacked them only a few days earlier.
"You watched them hurt your clanmates."
Didn't she have any sense of loyalty?
"Warriors fight,"
Silverstream growled.
"They don't poison rivers."
"ThunderClan does." Silverstream narrowed her eyes.
"But this isn't about ThunderClan, is it?" she snapped. "It's about Greystripe. You think he did it. You think that just because he crossed the border, he must be the poisoner. That's why you left me behind. You think I'd cover up for him."
Cover up for him? Leopardfur narrowed her eyes. She never imagined Silverstream would go as far as to hide another clan's treachery. "Would you?" she asked.
"There's nothing to cover up."
Leopardfur held her gaze. "I just wanted to leave you out of it," she mewed. "If we do find that Greystripe poisoned the river, I don't want any cat to think you're mixed up with it." Silverstream stared at her in disbelief.
"Do you think I'm mixed up with it?"
"Of course not." Leopardfur lowered her mew to a whisper.
"But you are involved with Greystripe. And if he's mixed up with the poisoning, you need to stay as far away from the whole thing as possible."
Silverstream was trembling.
"How could you think Greystripe would do such a fox-hearted thing?" she demanded. "He's a ThunderClan warrior," Leopardfur snapped back. "You're just obsessed," Silverstream growled. "Why can't you just keep your muzzle out of my affairs?"
"Because they are endangering the clan."
"That's not true!"
"Birdsong is dead," Leopardfur reminded her.
"And if ThunderClan is responsible,"
she paused.
"if Greystripe is responsible, then you need to decide whose side you're really on."
Silverstream stared at her without speaking. There was uncertainty in her eyes. A shiver of fear ran along Leopardfur's spine. She was really beginning to wonder exactly where Silverstream's loyalty lay. If she had to choose, was it possible that the River Clan she-cat would take the side of another clan?
"Silverstream,"
Leopardfur looked coolly at the she-cat.
"I want you to join the patrol."
The rain had held off since yesterday, and the river had receded a little, hopefully enough to find the source of the poison. After a long night of thought, Leopardfur thought she had an idea for how to pull Silverstream's loyalty back to their own clan. If Silverstream helped them uncover proof that Greystripe was mixed up in the river poisoning, she'd have to realize that her ThunderClan friend wasn't as innocent as she believed. And Leopardfur would no longer have to worry which clan Silverstream would support if they ever came into conflict. Silverstream eyed Leopardfur, her gaze sharp with suspicion, as she got to her paws and padded toward the patrol. Stonefur, Skyheart, and Piketooth were already waiting beside the camp entrance. Leopardfur led them out of camp and across the river where it flowed closest to the ThunderClan border.
"I don't know why we're looking here," Silverstream muttered. "The river might have been poisoned farther down."
Stonefur looked at her curiously. "The fish that killed Birdsong was caught here," he mewed.
"Fish swim," Silverstream's pelt ruffled. "They don't just stay in one place like bramble bushes. It could have been poisoned anywhere."
Leopardfur whisked her tail. "Let's not waste any time." Her clanmates might wonder why Silverstream was being difficult.
The shoreline is exposed again today, so we'll concentrate our search along the riverbank. Look out for unusual smells or sights, and report to me as soon as you find anything.
As Stonefur, Piketooth, and Skyheart headed away, Silverstream glared at her.
You're determined to prove it was Greystripe, aren't you?
This isn't about that, Leopardfur told her.
Really?
Silverstream sounded unconvinced. I'm just looking out for my clan, and I wish you were too. Silverstream swished her tail.
I'm going to find proof it wasn't Greystripe,
she snapped, and headed closer to the trees. Leopardfur padded along the shore, keeping an eye on the she-cat. If Silverstream did find proof that vilified Greystripe, she didn't want her to have the opportunity to hide it. The river was less wild today. The channels and ditches flowing into it were easy to see, and she picked her way along them, the chilly water swilling around her legs as she sniffed at the water cautiously. Her pads grew numb with cold as the morning dragged on. She could see her clanmates moving along the river, ahead and behind her, checking every inlet and pool along the edge. Worry was beginning to prick at Leopardfur's belly. What if they couldn't find the source of the poison? With every tail length of shoreline, she cared less about who had caused the poisoning and more about making sure the river was safe for her clanmates. As she crossed a pebbly stretch of shore, a sour tang touched her nose. She lifted her muzzle and opened her mouth, letting the air bathe her tongue. It was a scent she'd never smelled here before. It definitely wasn't a river scent. Her nose wrinkled, and she scanned the bank, stiffening as she saw something bobbing beside a clump of rushes at the water's edge. Strange, colored shapes were glinting among the reeds. She hurried toward them, guessing as she got near that they could only be two-legged trash. There was nothing natural about the smell or look of these shapes. They were bundled together and caught among the stems. She kept her paws dry until she was upstream and then waded in, feeling queasy as the stench of decay grew stronger.
I've found it!
She called to her clanmates, signaling with a flick of her tail for them to stay out of the filth that oozed from the trash and clouded the water around it. Skyheart waded in, her tail bushing as she picked up the scent.
It smells like carrion,
she mewed with disgust. Algae clung to the trash and spread, slimy and putrid, around it. As the water flowed by, the current tore off small patches of algae and swirled them away downstream. There was no doubt that this was the source of the poison that had killed Birdsong. Leopardfur bristled. Had some careless two-leg left it? Anger churned in her belly. She could challenge a threat from another clan, but there was no way to get revenge on a two-leg. Silverstream caught her eye. Her look of triumph made Leopardfur even angrier. Greystripe hadn't done this. She felt a flash of frustration. It would have been better for the young she-cat if she'd have been able to prove that Greystripe couldn't be trusted. Instead, she'd have to find another way to end Silverstream's relationship before the rest of RiverClan found out. Chapter 19. Leopardfur woke at dawn. Rain was pounding the roof, and the walls of the den shuddered in the wind. The weather had begun to worsen yesterday, as she led the patrol back to camp to report the two-legged trash to Crookedstar. She hadn't been able to hook it free of the reeds, even with the help of Piketooth, Stonefur, and Skyheart. If only they'd been able to send it swirling away downriver past the gorge. She'd planned to take a larger patrol out today, in the hope they might dislodge it. But from the sound of the rain, she guessed that the trash would have been submerged again. She slid from the den, narrowing her eyes against the weather, and in the gray early morning light, inspected the fresh-kill pile. A stale thrush, sodden and stiff, was all that was left, but at least there was something. Leopardfur. Mudfur's mew made her turn. Her father was padding toward her through the rain. The wind buffeted him, tugging at his thick fur. They were the only cats in the clearing, but Leopardfur could hear her clanmates stirring in the warrior's den. She'd be able to send out patrols soon. Mudfur glanced at the thrush. Are you hungry?
I was just checking.
She poked it with her paw.
Should I take this to the nursery?
Mudfur shook his head. Let Mosspelt and Mistyfoot sleep. he mewed. "They must be tired. I heard Dawn Kit mewling in the night. She must have kept the whole nursery awake." Leopard Fur tensed.
"Is Dawn Kit okay?"
"She's fine." Mud Fur shook the rain from his fur. "I checked. Just a nightmare." Leopard Fur looked up at the dark gray sky, the rain streaming around her eyes.
"We won't be able to reach the two-leg trash today."
"At least we know where it is," Mud Fur mewed. "The fish farther upstream won't be poisoned. You can hunt there today."
"But the river beyond the reed beds is narrow."
It had been so long since he'd been a warrior. He must have forgotten.
"And it'll be raging after all this rain. It may be too dangerous to fish."
Frogleap ducked out of the warrior's den, hunching against the rain. "Too dangerous to fish," he sniffed and padded toward them, his fur fluffed out. "Nowhere's too dangerous for a River Clan warrior." Leopard Fur frowned.
"Still," she mewed, "it might be better to hunt in the water meadow today."
"We've had too much land prey," Frogleap snorted. "My kits will grow up thinking they're ThunderClan cats."
"I guess we have spat out a lot of fur lately,"
Leopard Fur conceded. Frogleap swished his tail. "Besides, I like fast water fishing. It'll be fun." He blinked at Leopard Fur and she dipped her head.
"Okay," she mewed. "I'll lead a hunting patrol there once I've organized the others. You can join it." She hooked up the thrush. "But first I'm taking this to Greypool."
Dawn gave way to daylight, which was hardly brighter, but at least the rain was easing by the time Leopard Fur led the patrol out of camp. She'd asked Skyheart and Loudbelly to join them, and it almost felt as though they were apprentices again as they trekked upstream. The rain had stopped by the time they'd passed the reed beds. Leopard Fur had been right. The river was flowing fast here, churning and frothing as it raced between the steep banks. Farther upstream, she could see trees rocking in the wind. Even from here, she could hear their branches creaking and groaning like grouchy elders. Leopard Fur scanned the water. Twigs and leaves swirled past, the river swallowing them, only to spit them out again a few tail lengths away, as though it didn't like the taste.
"Perhaps we should hunt on the shore until the current's less fierce," she suggested.
"Don't be a mouse heart." Frogleap stood at the edge, his ears pricked eagerly. "I want to give Robin Kit, Dawn Kit, and Wood Kit their first bite of carp." He blinked at Leopard Fur affectionately. "They might love it as much as you do." Leopard Fur glanced at him, purring.
"Why wouldn't they? Carp is the tastiest fish."
She plunged in. The river caught her and pulled her under, but it buoyed her up again and she burst splashing through the surface. It was exhilarating. She swam against the current, relishing the challenge and enjoying the rush of water through her pelt. Skyheart dived after her while Loudbelly slid into the shallows and swam close to the bank.
"It's hard to believe you used to be a dry paw," she teased as she surfaced beside Leopard Fur. "I was barely a kit."
Leopard Fur splashed her with her paw, and Skyheart darted away through the frothing water, her eyes shining.
"Look!"
Skyheart pointed with her nose to a shape racing beneath the surface toward them. She ducked under and surfaced a moment later with a small chub between her jaws. She made for the shore and flung it onto the bank. Frogleap sniffed it and whisked his tail. "I'm going to catch a carp." He dived in, and Leopard Fur watched the water close over him. She waited eagerly for him to surface. It had been a while since they'd fished together. Perhaps they could catch something big like a salmon. She twisted in the water, looking for him. Where was he? Fighting to hold herself in place, she turned again. Alarm began to spark in her belly.
"Frogleap!"
Skyheart was swimming a few tail lengths away, her muzzle in the water as she searched for fish. Loudbelly was nosing beneath the sedge overhanging the bank.
"Frogleap!"
Frightened now, Leopard Fur ducked underwater, her eyes stinging as she strained to see through the frothing water. The river buffeted her, and she struggled against the current. In a few moments, she was out of breath and had to surface for air. As she bobbed up, she saw Frogleap swimming toward her.
"There you are!"
She splashed toward him, swinging a playful blow at his ear.
"You scared me!"
she mewed. He swam away from her, his whiskers twitching. "I was just checking the bottom for lurking fish," he mewed. But the current's strong down there, too. It looks like we'll have to wait for the fish to come to us." He turned and looked expectantly upstream. His ears pricked as he seemed to spot something moving below the surface. "Get ready," he mewed. "If I don't catch it, you can." He disappeared under the water again, and Leopardfur's heart quickened. She dropped beneath the surface and saw a trout swimming toward her. Frogleap was right behind it, his paws outstretched. As she unsheathed her claws, ready to catch it, it jerked suddenly backward. Frogleap had grabbed it. Leopardfur bobbed up to the surface, delight surging in her chest as he appeared next to her, the trout between his jaws. He carried it to the shore and flung it out beside Skyheart's chub. Near the bank, Loudbelly had hooked a perch that must have been hiding among the trailing sedge. He leaped from the water, holding it with his teeth, and placed it beside the others. It was raining again, the water pounding the shore, and before he slid back in again, he moved their catch farther from the edge, as though afraid it might get washed back into the water. Before long, the pile had doubled.
"We should take these back to camp,"
Leopardfur called over the roar of the water. Her paws were growing tired from fighting the current, and there were nearly more fish in the pile than they could carry. "I haven't caught a carp yet," Frogleap called back. He'd swum a little way farther upstream, where the river was even narrower and churned so fiercely it was hard to make out his mew above the noise. Leopardfur swam toward him, pushing hard against the current.
"There won't be carp this far upstream,"
she called. He must know that carp preferred to bask in calmer water.
"Your kits will have to wait until we've cleared away the trash so we can fish for it."
"There must be carp here," Frogleap yelled back. "The only way to get downstream is from upstream." He plunged beneath the water. Here the river cut a deep trench in the middle of the channel, and she dived with him, pushing after him through the swirling water. He was darting back and forth along the trench like an otter, his fur billowing around him. Her heart quickened as she recognized the sleek outline of a carp racing toward him. It was traveling fast, swept along by the current. Would he be quick enough to grab it? She pushed down toward the bottom of the trench, fighting the river as it tried to push her backward. If Frogleap missed the carp, she'd get it. Frogleap kicked out with his hind legs, shooting through the water as though it were no more than air. Claws outstretched, he hooked the carp and dragged it toward his jaws to give the killing bite. Frogleap's kits would get their first taste of carp after all. Leopardfur swam happily to the surface and broke from the water, gulping fresh air. Then she stiffened. Upstream, something dropped from one of the trees. It splashed into the river, long, dark, and heavy enough to send slices of water arcing over the riverbank. A branch, broken off by the wind. Her heart lurched as the river grabbed it and sped it downstream. It was heading straight for them. If Frogleap surfaced now, it would hit him. She ducked down to warn him and saw him rising through the water, his eyes bright with triumph as he clasped the carp between his jaws. "No!" Her scream wouldn't carry through the churning water. She choked as her mouth filled, and panic gripped her as the branch, a dark shadow above them, raced toward Frogleap. She swam for him, the weight of the water so fierce that frustration clawed in her belly as she fought to get near. She reached for him as he surfaced, saw him jerk as the branch hit him, and watched, frozen, as the current snatched him away. He spun, his paws flailed for a moment, then he fell limp, and the river dragged him toward her. Heart bursting, she grabbed for him again and felt his fur sweep her claws, just a whisker out of reach, as he tumbled past. She blinked the water from her eyes and stared, horror-stricken as the river carried him away. "Frogleap!" Skyheart was watching from the bank, her eyes wide. Loudbelly stared helplessly from the shallows as Frogleap was washed downriver. Leopardfur launched herself into the current, letting it lift her, swimming with it so fast that the shore blurred beside her. She didn't take her eyes from Frogleap. The river carried him like a leaf on the stream, faster and faster, and then, suddenly, sucked him under, and he disappeared. Skyheart was bounding along the bank. "Leopardfur!" she screeched. Leopardfur glanced at her. "Get out of there!" Skyheart's cry was frenzied with panic. Leopardfur turned in the water and followed her clanmate's gaze back upstream. Pieces of broken branch were swirling toward her. The wind must have torn the whole tree apart. The surface of the river was strewn with lumps of wood. Alarm flashed beneath Leopardfur's pelt. She lunged for the shore, pulling herself out a moment before the branches and bark hurtled past. She stared after them as the river sucked them under, carrying them down to the same dark place it had dragged Frogleap. She couldn't speak. Skyheart stood stiffly beside her as Loudbelly caught up to them and stared downriver.
I should have saved him,
Leopardfur whispered.
You tried,
Skyheart croaked.
I saw you. He was out of reach. I should have swum harder.
Grief twisted her heart until the pain was unbearable.
I should have been quicker.
Skyheart leaned against her.
It was all too fast,
she breathed.
There was nothing you could have done.
Leopardfur couldn't speak anymore. She wanted to crumple on the shore. All these moons, a tiny piece of her had wondered what her life might have been if she had done as Frogleap asked and chosen him over being deputy. A not-so-tiny part of her still loved him in a way that defied reason. Now he was gone, and she hadn't been able to save him. She couldn't pry her eyes from the raging river, wishing it would give back the cat who'd known her best. Chapter 20. Leopardfur padded numbly toward the camp. Loudbelly was trembling beside her as Skyheart walked ahead, directing them. The weight of Frogleap, slung between her and Loudbelly's shoulders, seemed more than she could bear, but she kept putting one paw in front of the other, staring blindly ahead as her heart ached with more pain than she thought possible. She could feel the last of his warmth ebbing away as they limped through the reed tunnel into the clearing and let him slide from their backs onto the muddy earth. The rain had started again as they'd searched the riverbank for Frogleap's body. It had beaten down relentlessly as they dragged it from the reeds where it had been caught. Leopardfur had hoped for a moment that he might still be alive, but one glimpse of his wide, glazed eyes had told her that he was dead. Now, back at camp, the rain fell even harder, as though StarClan had no pity for the living. Her clanmates were sheltering in their dens. Only Sedge Creek and Stonefur were outside, huddled beneath the sedge wall as they shared a bedraggled starling. Sedge Creek looked up as Frogleap's body thumped to the ground. Stonefur hurried across the clearing. "What happened?" he asked. Leopardfur's throat tightened.
The river.
The words died on her tongue. She didn't want to relive the accident or make it more real by speaking of it. Shimmerpelt slid from the warrior's den. Grasswhisker and Blackclaw followed. One by one, the clan crept out into the rain and gathered around Frogleap's body. No one spoke, as though they too feared making a nightmare real. Mistyfoot poked her head from the nursery, her ears twitching nervously as she saw them.
What is it?
Stonefur turned his head toward her. Frogleap's dead.
Does that mean he won't come to the nursery anymore?
Perchkit squeezed past his mother and blinked at her as Pikekit and Reedkit peered from between her paws. Mistyfoot touched her nose to his head.
Yes,
she mewed softly.
Let's go back inside. I want you to play with Robin-Kit, Wood-Kit, and Dawn-Kit for a while. Mosspelt has to. Has something happened?
Mosspelt mewed from inside the nursery. Mistyfoot disappeared inside. A moment later, Mosspelt burst out and ran across the clearing. She stopped beside Frogleap's body and stared at it as though she expected him to move, as though he might not be dead after all. Then she crouched and began to tremble, a low moan rising in her throat as she touched her nose to Frogleap's sodden pelt. The rain battered her, and Leopardfur's chest tightened as she watched. She felt so helpless. She could not bring Frogleap back, or stop the rain. She could only watch the heartbreaking scene as her clanmates began to whisper softly around her. "How did he die?" Heavystep mewed. "Were you attacked by ThunderClan?" Reedtail asked.
It was an accident.
Leopardfur saw the branch racing toward Frogleap, her breath stopping as she pictured his body jerk and grow limp and the river sweep him away. Cedarpelt stood beside his body, staring wide-eyed, as though he couldn't believe his kit was dead. "River Clan warriors don't drown," he murmured. Lakeshine pressed against him, shivering as rain dripped from her whiskers.
"He was a strong swimmer."
Leopardfur felt the gazes of her clanmates settle on her as though they were kits and she were their mother. They wanted her to explain, but the words were too painful.
"Frogleap can't be dead. He has kits. He was happy."
She stared at them blankly, her thoughts stuck.
"And I loved him." "A branch hit him,"
Skyheart mewed. Gratitude flickered in Leopardfur's chest as her friend patted forward and began to tell her clanmates how this had happened. Mudfur nosed his way through the crowd and stopped beside Leopardfur. He didn't speak, but let his fur rest softly against hers. She glanced at him.
"Where's Crooked Star?"
The River Clan leader should be with them. Mudfur glanced toward his den. "He's in his nest," he mewed. "It's probably best he stay there." Leopardfur stiffened.
"Is he ill?"
"Just tired," Mudfur mewed quietly. Leopardfur broke away and headed toward the River Clan leader's den. He had to be told. His clan needed him. She pushed through the trailing moss and blinked at him. Crooked Star was sleeping, unaware of the rain dripping through the roof and soaking his nest. He rolled over and began to snore.
"Crooked Star."
Leopardfur leaned close. She poked him gently with a paw.
"Wake up. Something's happened."
He blinked open his eyes, looking blearily at her for a moment before sitting up. Leopardfur suddenly realized how old he'd grown. His thick pelt was matted, and there was confusion in his eyes as he struggled awake. "What is it?" he mewed thickly.
"Frogleap's dead," she told him as gently as she could. "It was an accident. He drowned."
The simple words pierced her heart like thorns. Crooked Star's eyes rounded with grief. "Dead?" She nodded. He looked away as though he was having trouble taking it in. Leopardfur felt a flash of panic. She wanted him to talk to the clan and soften the sharpest edge of their grief. But looking at him now, she realized he wasn't strong enough. She would have to comfort them. She felt suddenly unsteady, remembering how she'd once been ready to snatch leadership from Crooked Star the moment he'd fallen ill. How had she ever thought she could manage such a responsibility? But she must. Crooked Star looked like an elder. He couldn't lead the clan through something like this. She closed her eyes, feeling the shelter and warmth of the den, wishing she could stay here and hide in its shadows, alone with the grief that was clawing at her heart. But her clan needed her. She opened her eyes and looked at Crooked Star. He was staring at the floor, murmuring to himself. "Frogleap's dead." His mew was choked with sadness.
"Stay here and rest," she told him.
She lifted her muzzle.
"I'll speak to the clan."
It seemed to take every spark of energy she had to force herself back through the trailing moss and across the rain-soaked camp. It was growing dark. Her clanmates were no more than shadows in the clearing. She wove among them and stopped beside Frogleap's body. Lakeshine had joined Mosspelt, crouching beside it. Bright mules sounded from the nursery.
Primrose Kit, you're the hunter this time. I'm going to catch you. Hey, that's not fair. I was in the nest.
"Quiet."
Mistyfoot's mew was hushed but firm.
"Keep your voices down."
Why?
As the squeals quietened, Leopardfur looked around her clanmates.
"We lost a beloved clanmate today,"
she began slowly. Their gazes were searching hers, looking for comfort. Her belly tightened.
"He was a true warrior, loyal and brave. The clan won't be the same without him. But he wouldn't want you to grieve for him. We will see him again in StarClan. And when we do, we want him to be proud of us. We want him to see that we never for a moment stopped taking care of our clanmates. that we never let grief get in the way of keeping them safe.
True. Timberfur nodded gently. Pike-Tooth dipped his head. It's what he would want.
How could StarClan take him?
Mosspelt turned her agonized gaze toward Leopardfur. Leopardfur met it. She needed to have an answer, not just for Mosspelt, but for the whole clan. She paused, taking a breath.
I know it feels like StarClan is testing us,
she told Mosspelt. Then she lifted her gaze and looked around the others.
We are threatened by ThunderClan and WindClan. Snow and rain have made fishing hard and left us hungry, and the river has been poisoned.
She let the words sink in for a moment before she spoke again.
But Frogleap was the first to meet any challenge. He risked fishing in fast water to find prey for his kits. He relished the challenge, and if he were here, he'd tell you to relish it too. He'd tell us a challenge is a chance to prove that a warrior is more than just claws and teeth. A warrior is heart and mind. It is not how we hunt and fight that defines our success, but how we face tragedy, how we rise above it. This is how we prove we are true warriors. That is what Frogleap would have done. That is what he would expect us to do, because he knew, just as I do, that RiverClan warriors are the truest of all. And if we face more challenges than other clans, it is because we are stronger and braver than any of them.
Her words surprised her. She wondered for a moment where they'd come from. Had StarClan been guiding her thoughts? For a moment her heart lifted as she looked around the clan and saw their eyes spark with determination. She had reached them, and they were repaying her with loyalty and courage. And yet Mosspelt was still watching her, eyes shimmering with grief.
How will I tell the kits?
She asked. Leopardfur had to force her paws not to tremble. She met Mosspelt's gaze steadily. I'll help. Mosspelt got to her paws. Her clanmates parted to let her through as she headed slowly for the nursery. Leopardfur followed, aware of Frogleap's body lying stiff and cold behind them. Begin the vigil, she whispered to Timberfur as she passed him. He nodded, and she padded after Mosspelt and ducked into the nursery. The kits were leaping from nest to nest. Mosspelt's kits almost indistinguishable from Mistyfoot's as they chased each other around the willow den. Mistyfoot looked up as she entered. Leopardfur nodded to her. Will you take your kits to the Elder's Den for a little while? Primrose Kit stopped and stared at her.
Why?
Greypool gets lonely, Leopardfur told her. It'll do her good to have some lively, energetic kits around her for a while.
Can we go too?
Robin Kit mewed. Mosspelt's eyes glinted with pain.
You stay here with me.
She blinked at Woodkit and Dongkit.
You too. There's something I have to tell you.
Perchkit blinked at her eagerly.
Will you tell us too?
Mistyfoot will tell you later. Leopardfur shooed him away gently with her tail. It seemed to take a long time for Mistyfoot to gather her kits and bustle them out of the den. All the while, Leopardfur was aware of Mosspelt trying to stop herself trembling as she watched her kits.
Is something wrong?
Woodkit seemed to sense his mother's distress. He padded toward her and blinked at her anxiously. Robinkit and Dongkit clustered around him.
What is it?
Dongkit mewed.
Why did Primrose Kit have to go?
Robinkit asked.
We were having fun.
Dongkit sounded indignant.
I have something to tell you.
Mosspelt's mew was tight, as though the words were stuck in her throat. Woodkit moved closer. He was quivering, and Mosspelt sat down and drew him to her with her tail and tucked him close.
Frogleap has gone to join StarClan,
she mewed.
Why?
Dongkit blinked at her.
Doesn't he like us anymore?
He had no choice,
Mosspelt mewed.
There was an accident in the river. He was hurt, and now he has to live with StarClan.
Woodkit's eyes were round.
But he'll come back when he's better, won't he?
Mosspelt shook her head.
He can't come back, she mewed. He died. He can never come back.
Her eyes glistened. Leopard Fur padded forward.
He can watch over you, though, she told the kits. He'll watch you from StarClan.
Woodkit began to wail.
But I want to see him. Can we visit him?
Robin Kit asked.
No.
Mosspelt leaned forward and grabbed his scruff, pulling him close. Leopard Fur could hardly bear to watch as he huddled against his mother, confused and sad and so small that she wondered how she could ever protect him from all the dangers he would have to face. Dawn Kit sat down and stared at her mother. There was no grief in her gaze.
Can we eat soon?
She asked Mosspelt. Leopard Fur flinched. The kit was too young to understand. She glanced at Mosspelt. What would the Queen do? Dawn Kit was still staring at her mother.
Frogleap said we could have our first bite of fish today. He said he'd bring us some.
She turned to Leopard Fur.
Did he catch anything? He promised.
Yes.
Leopard Fur's mew cracked as she pictured him proudly holding the carp. The carp was gone, washed away when the branch had struck him. But the rest of their catch was still on the bank.
We left it behind.
How could they have carried home prey along with their clanmate's body? But she must keep Frogleap's promise.
I'll go and fetch it.
She caught Mosspelt's eye.
Will you be okay? Yes,
she whispered.
And thank you. They should taste Frogleap's last gift to them.
The Queen drew Dawn Kit close and touched her nose to her head.
It's going to be okay,
she promised. Leopard Fur dreamed. The forest was falling. Birds fluttered into the sky as their nests dropped away beneath them. Mice and voles swarmed from beneath crumbling roots. Bark and wood tumbled into the river until it was choked, and the fish were caught in the tangle of branches, and the water, with nowhere left to flow, spread across the land, swallowing the reed beds and water meadows. Deep in the dream, Leopard Fur squirmed in the nest. Panic dragged her deeper into darkness until she could hardly breathe. She struggled to wake, but the long trek to collect the abandoned catch and the vigil for Frogleap afterward, the rain falling harder as the night wore on, had exhausted her. And yet she hadn't even buried Frogleap's body, but had left it in the clearing because the burial patch was flooded. And the entire time the river was rising around the reed beds and lapping over the edges of the camp. The wails of her clanmates filled her dream. They grew shriller and more high-pitched until they became the shrieks of kits. Kits! Leopard Fur woke at last. The squealing was real. She lifted her head sharply and looked around. Water had pooled at the bottom of her nest. It was swilling through the den. Flood! Pelt spiking, she leaped from her nest.
Wake up!
Reedtail and Stonefur were already scrambling out of their waterlogged nests. The kits squealed again as Leopard Fur shot from the den and splashed through the water that was swirling across the clearing. The river had burst its banks. It streamed through the camp, so high now that it almost reached the Elder's den. The other dens were awash, and her clanmates were dashing here and there, grabbing hold of willow stems and bundles of reeds that were floating toward the river. The apprentice's den had been torn apart. The reed wall had been breached, and nests were spinning toward the gap where the current sucked one out, then another, and swept them into open water. Stonefur and Silverstream tried to snatch them as they washed past. "Leave them!" Leopard Fur yowled. "Save the nursery!" The willow den was splitting open because the wind tore at it and water dragged at the base. As Stonefur and Silverstream raced toward it, Mosspelt shot out. Robin Kit was swinging from her jaws. Dawn Kit and Wood Kit clung to her back. The kit shrieked in terror while Mosspelt stared around, her eyes wide with horror. "Head for the Elder's den," Leopard Fur told her. With any luck, the water wouldn't reach it. As Mosspelt raced away, Mistyfoot burst from the nursery holding Reed Kit's scruff. She passed him to Stonefur and turned back inside. A moment later she appeared again, Primrose Kit dangling from her jaws. Silverstream nodded toward the Elder's den.
Take her there! I'll get Perch Kit and Pike Kit.
She pushed her way inside the nursery. As Leopard Fur raced to help, the river swelled and lifted. A wave swept through the camp. It hit the nursery, ripping away the woven walls. Exposed to the storm now, Perch Kit and Pike Kit squealed in their nest. Silverstream hooked her claws into it, but the water snatched it away. Leopard Fur charged after it, but another wave knocked her sideways. As she floundered and tried to regain her balance, the nest swirled away through the gap in the camp wall and out onto the river. Perch Kit and Pike Kit stared over the edge, their faces twisted in terror, and she froze and watched them spin away into the darkness, their squeals drowned by the roaring water.
No!
The earth seemed to tremble beneath her paws. She was helpless. Silverstream thrust her muzzle in Leopard Fur's face.
Save the others!
Another swell was howling toward the camp. Leopard Fur snatched her thoughts from the lost kits. She scanned the clearing.
Where's Mudfur?
Sedge Creek turned from where she was trying to hold the walls of the warrior's den in place as the flood dragged at them.
He's with Greypool.
Leopard Fur felt a wash of relief.
What about Crooked Star?
She shrieked.
I haven't seen him.
Sedge Creek grabbed at a bundle of reeds. Stone Fur was helping Loudbelly and Lakeshine gather pieces of broken den wall from the reeds. Leopard Fur called to him.
Have you seen Crooked Star?
The Grey Tom shook his head. Surely the River Clan leader wasn't still in his den. Leopard Fur rushed toward it as the water swelled and surged around her. It had reached the Elder's den.
Get Greypool out,
she called to Black Claw.
And the kits!
She turned to Vixenleap and Emberdawn, who were watching the water rise with horror.
Evacuate the camp! Get everyone inland and onto high ground!
As the two she-cats began to round up their clanmates, Leopard Fur slewed to a halt outside Crooked Star's den, sending arcs of water over the root walls. They were already half submerged with water. A fresh wave swallowed them, and Crooked Star struggled out, coughing. She reached him and put her shoulder beneath his, helping him limp across the flooded clearing.
"Is everyone safe?"
he spluttered. Perch Kit and Pike Kit were washed away. She didn't dare tell him. What could he do? She was fighting back panic, her thoughts reeling. Could she have saved them? Would they be safe if they managed to cling to their nest? Should she risk sending warriors after them? Vixenleap and Emberdawn were hurrying their clanmates through a gap they'd torn in the sedge. The river beyond was no more than a channel. It was raging, but narrow. With help, every cat could swim it, even Greypool, who stood at the edge now, her pelt on end. Crooked Star limped to a halt.
"Go and help them."
He nudged her toward them.
"I'll follow."
She blinked at him.
I have to get you to safety.
"I want to check the Elder's den,"
he told her. It was the last den left standing.
Every cat's here,
she told him, nodding to where Mudfur was helping Greypool to cross the channel. Mosspelt and Mistyfoot were waiting to follow with their kits. He looked at her.
"I need to make sure no cat is left behind."
Leopard Fur let him go and hurried toward her clanmates. Mistyfoot had crossed the channel with Primrose Kit and watched Blackclaw follow with Reed Kit. As he scrambled out, she led him into the darkness, where higher ground and safety were waiting. Mosspelt hesitated on the edge. Dawn Kit was dangling from her jaws. Wood Kit and Robin Kit clung to her back.
I'll help you.
Leopard Fur eased herself into the racing water, churning her paws as she struggled not to be swept away.
Come on,
she called to Mosspelt. Tentatively, Mosspelt waded toward her. Dawn Kit squealed and struggled. Robin Kit and Wood Kit buried their muzzles deep into their mother's fur. As Mosspelt pushed out into the channel, a roar sounded from upstream. Leopard Fur's pelt sparked with terror when a wall of water thundered toward them. Soon it reached them, curling into a wave that broke over her and pushed her under water. She struggled to the surface. Thrashing her paws in panic, she felt Mosspelt's pelt and hooked in her claws. The queen shrieked and floundered in her grip. As the wave receded, Leopard Fur stared at her, growing stiff as dread hollowed her belly. Where were the kits? They'd disappeared. Only Mosspelt remained beside her.
I couldn't hold on.
Wild with panic, Mosspelt tried to drag herself free of Leopard Fur's grip.
I have to save them!
You can't. Leopard Fur hauled her to the far side. Frogleap would never forgive her for letting Mosspelt go. As she dragged the queen, wailing onto the bank, a flash of grey fur dived past them into the channel.
I'll save them!
Crookedstar! She recognized the River Clan leader's yowl as he disappeared beneath the water and resurfaced a few tail lengths downstream. He rolled, flailing for a moment. Then, finding his balance, he struck out and swam with the current. Mosspelt stared as he disappeared into the night, the water frothing around him. Desperation glittered in her eyes. Leopard Fur nosed her inland, following her clanmates, her thoughts reeling as they trekked to higher ground. Crookedstar would never survive the flood. He wasn't the strong warrior he'd once been, and the water was too fierce even for a young cat. As the clan halted, gathering higher up the hill, she gazed down the slope. It was hidden in darkness, but she could hear the river roaring, as though howling its victory over the fragile camp. Her fur clinging to her body, Leopard Fur pressed back a shiver. Stone Fur stood beside her.
Is everyone here?
She asked him softly. All except the kids and Crookedstar, he breathed back.
They'll never survive,
she whispered. He glanced at her, his eyes dark. Crookedstar has 9 lives. She nodded. But how many of them were left? Enough to save Mosspelt's kids? Enough to find his way back to shore? Leopard Fur's paws felt like stone. The rain was easing, but she barely noticed. How had she allowed so many kits to be lost? The cold began to reach into her bones, but she didn't move. As the night slowly gave way to dawn, she gazed across the river. The gray light revealed a devastated camp, and her heart seemed to stop as she made out a gray shape on the bank downstream. It lay motionless on a stretch of mud. Reeds crushed by the flood were strewn around it. Behind her, Leopard Fur could hear Primrose Kit crying. She must be hungry. She patted where Stone Fur had curled in a bracken patch beside his clanmates and woke him with the touch of her nose.
Organize a hunting patrol, she whispered softly. The clan is hungry, and I have to go and check on something.
He looked at her, blinking away sleep. Where are you going?
I can see Crookedstar,
she breathed.
I think he's dead. I'm going to fetch him.
The bracken stirred as Mud Fur nosed his way through. I'm coming with you. Me too. Stone Fur patted to where Skyheart was curled beside Blackclaw. He poked her gently with a paw. Can you organize a hunting patrol? He asked her as she lifted her head. She scrambled to her paws, nodding. Leopard Fur headed downslope, Mud Fur at her heels. Stone Fur hurried to catch up and fell in beside her. They didn't speak as they followed the shore through the gray dawn. She could see Crookedstar's body on the riverbank. It wasn't far now. She slowed as she saw he was curled around 3 more bodies, as small as ducklings, bedraggled and unmoving. Mud Fur broke into a run. She raced after him. By the time she pulled up beside the bodies, the medicine cat was already kneading Robin Kit's chest. Rub their chests, Mud Fur nodded toward Dawn Kit and Wood Kit. What about Crookedstar? Leopard Fur asked, dropping down beside Dawn Kit and resting her paws on her tiny body. He has more lives than these kits, Mud Fur mewed. Star Clan will take care of him. As Stone Fur began to work on Wood Kit, glancing at Mud Fur to learn what to do, Leopard Fur's pelt tingled with panic. Dawn Kit felt so small beneath her pads, and so cold. Could she really be saved? Do it, Mud Fur ordered sharply. Leopard Fur copied him, pumping the she-kit's chest with small rhythmic strokes as though squeezing water from wet moss. Crookedstar hadn't moved. Her thoughts spiraled. Did he have any lives left? After the sickness had nearly killed him, perhaps he'd used his last one to save the kits. I'll be leader. The idea filled her with fear. I'm not ready. The flood had been more powerful than she could ever have imagined. How had she believed she could ever lead the clan? There were so many dangers, and she was just one cat. How can I protect them? Suddenly, Dawn Kit twitched beneath her paws and coughed. The kit rolled over and vomited water onto the shore.
Leopard Fur's heart burst with gratitude. Thanks, Star Clan! She grabbed Dawn-Kit and pulled her close, wrapping her tail around her to warm her. It's okay, she soothed. You're safe now. Mudfur sat back on his haunches and stared at Robin-Kit, his eyes shimmering. Stonefur was still working on Wood-Kit. He signaled with a nod for the Grey Tom to stop too. It's no good, he mewed. They're gone. Leopard Fur breathed in Dawn-Kit's scent. Frogleap had died, and now 2 of his kits. As grief threatened to overwhelm her, Crookedstar coughed. A spasm ran along his flank, and he twitched suddenly into life. Mudfur darted to his side and sniffed him anxiously. Crookedstar? Crookedstar sat up slowly, his eyes glittering with shock. He glanced toward the kits and then met Leopard Fur's gaze. There was such darkness in his eyes, she shivered. She suddenly understood the responsibility he'd borne all these years, a burden heavier than she'd ever imagined. Holding Dawn-Kit closer, she dipped her head. When her time came to lead RiverClan, would she be ready?